baby boomer fans. We are Jackie and Janine, the Pfeiffer sisters, and love to talk about the 1950s, inviting you to reminisce with us as we explore experiences of that decade. Grab your favorite malt or Green River. Make sure you are wide awake and get ready to be inspired about the 1950s. Welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat. Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. You have Jackie and me as your special guests today. And I want to thank everyone who on Facebook responded to a post that I had put on either my personal page or on the Facebook group page, the North Dakota History of Cities, Towns, and Places. And that particular page that I put on had to do with ordering yard goods or fabrics, fashion fabrics, quilting fabrics from mail order catalogs in the 1950s. And of course, what was exciting, Jackie, there was nothing more exciting hardly than to come home from school and to know that the Montgomery Ward catalog had come, or the Sears catalog, or the J.C. Penney catalog, or the Alden's catalog, and there was the Spiegel catalog. Oh my goodness, how often we got to just sit and look through those pages. And it was interesting because I had forgotten that yard goods could be ordered through the catalog, and which kind of sparked my memory in that we did order some yard goods from the Montgomery Ward's catalog, but more than likely we purchased fabric for sewing from the many sewing stores, fabric stores that we had in Bismarck. We were very, very fortunate to live close enough to Bismarck and have all the opportunities that Bismarck afforded, including a variety of fabric stores. So for those of you who loved sewing, who don't love sewing, who sewed in 4-H, who your mother sewed or you sewed or anything like that, we hope that you enjoyed this fun chat today. And maybe it'll bring back some memories. We hope pleasant memories for you as well. And when we talk about sewing and fabrics and how this all really was an impetus for our sewing creativity for many years and even as adults. Jackie, you have so much to show us today because you are the keeper of the museum
of tactile history.
That is true. That is true. And so, do you remember ordering any fabric from the mail order catalogs?
I really do not. My memories take us to Penny's, J.C. Penney store, where we, as you went downstairs and we stood on and we stood there on the platform, and then we looked at the rainbow of colors downstairs.
Yes,
that's the J.C. Penney store.
Oh yes, I know. It was just like a whole new world had opened up because our first fabrics that Mom had used for making some clothing for us, some dresses or skirts, happened to be made from feed sack fabrics. So the good old PV elevator in Bismarck was our first fabric store. And that's where Dad would go to buy 50-pound bags of chicken mash. And so Jackie's let me get this on full screen here for you. Jackie is showing you a piece of feed sack fabric that she had used to make her first garment in 4-H, which was a gathered skirt. And what I recall in these feed sack dresses or skirts, the bags themselves, were that most of those prints were geometrics. I don't know that there were many floral prints. They were mostly geometrics. Is that what you recall, Jackie?
Because that was much more common. Anybody could use it for any reason, rather than having just children's or fabrics or something that was more fancy than regular everyday patterns.
Could be used for men or women as far as that goes. And I remember when we would go to the elevator to pick up chicken feed, Mom would say to Dad, "Okay, Jack, I need you to get 2 or 3 bags of chicken mash that are of all the same prints, because I need to make a dress
or Jackie or Janine or me. And so that's what he'd do. And it was so at that time in our lives, we had the choice of probably 3 different fabrics from which to choose. The 3 different prints that the PV elevator had on hand at that time.
Right.
So then what did you have any special feeling about that sewing with feed sacks?
I did.
Oh,
I wanted clothing that was purchased,
uh-huh.
but we were fortunate enough to have a mom who could make anything, out of a fabric. So
Yes.
that sort of bothered me, but I got over it.
Well, it was fun to, again, going back to those mail order catalogs,
Mhm.
to look through the girls' ready to wear clothing that we could have purchased, but we would show mom which dresses that we really liked. Then
Mhm.
she would make the exact same thing for us. So in a way, we
Mhm.
did get purchased garments too. And she was a
Right.
beautiful seamstress, very exact and precise, and she taught us those same techniques and that same protocol when we began to sew also in 4-H. So Jackie, what do you have in front of you there that can help us tell the
Our
story of
story.
sewing?
Well, first of all, I'm going to set the scene by reading just a little bit from our book, While the Windmill Watched. Oh, and by the way, see the back here? We call this picture the Daisy Girls. It's because we're sitting in front of Grandma's daisies by her steps. And the dress that I have on is a feed sack. The skirt is a feed sack, and the top part is yellow. This lovely little sundress also has a jacket, and the feed sack maybe wasn't enough for the top, so mom had some extra yellow fabric left over, and that is how she made this. I love the outfit though, so
Yes.
even though it was. Um,
Unfortunately, the colors are going to be a little fainter looking than what they
right,
actually.
right. So anyway, we're jumping now to 4-H. My first girls project, because we belonged to both the boys and the girls 4-H clubs. Boys were more agricultural. So the first girls project was used. What I did was a wool stuffed wrist pin cushion, and the lanolin in the wool prevents the pins and needles from rusting. And I made a needle storage case and a scissors case. Now, mom was the original recycler, I think. The needle and scissors fabric were cut from a good quality brown felted hat that she had worn when she was a single career woman. And I thought it was a real shame to cut this wool hat up to make these items.
But she wasn't wearing it anymore.
No, she wasn't, but it was a beautiful hat. So then, with the threaded sharp needle, my hand sewing skills produced a rectangular floral print dresser scarf. And of course, the stitches had to be perfect. And here happens to be that dresser scarf right here. And you won't be able to see it, but on the other side, the hem stitches were perfect. And how do they get them perfect?
Yes.
With this little tool right here.
Did any
Yes.
Did any of you, our viewers, have a seam gauge like that? Or do you still have a seam gauge? Was that part of your collection of sewing equipment?
Or sometimes called a hem gauge, but the same thing. So thanks to this, each of my stitches were perfect, and that's kind of the way we did things at our house. It was, if you're going to do it right, my mom would say.
Did you ever use that dresser scarf?
Oh yes, in fact, it's a fall color, so I still display it.
Ah, okay.
Who knew that I would be doing that?
Yes.
So
back then, cotton fabrics required ironing too.
Mm-hmm.
There was no such thing as wash and wear. Right.
No. And before steam irons came into being, many people had this little object. You know what that is? Everybody?
Oh, show us that. A cork with a little deal with with pinholes in the end.
Yes. Okay. Quit. I'm not doing very well. There it is.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. This way, you would sprinkle the clothes and then iron, and that would provide some steam.
And it would go. We would put it on top of a 7-Up pop bottle.
Right.
And then mom would sprinkle the clothes and roll them up and then put them in a plastic bag. So until she was great.
Learned to use a treadle machine, and those first time projects, we learned many skills, and one was regulating the treadle so it wouldn't go too fast or too slowly. We also learned, and in our first garment was a gathered skirt, and we learned about gathering, and we learned to put in a zipper. We learned for straight stitching and then hand stitching when we put in the hem. And that particular, my second gathered skirt was this one right here.
So do you remember what the seam finishes were? Because that was cotton fabric that raveled. What?
Oh, here, there's the, yes.
There's the finished garment.
Mm-hmm.
All fresh with ribbons underneath it, anklets, a cinch belt, a stretch belt to go with it.
Penny loafers, brown penny loafers, very 50s right here. So you ask about seam finishes. There were, let's see if I can remember. We would fold it under, and then it would be a straight edge. We also would whip stitch the raw edges, or we could put bias tape on each edge. And that was used more for when later on we sewed with wool. Or the very first seam finish would be pinking shears.
Yes, that's what I remember. I think that if most every seamstress had a pinking shears. Right. Ladies and gentlemen watching this who sewed in the 50s or had an experience with sewing, did you ever have a pair of pinking shears? I bet we forgot to bring one of those on board to show people, but
I can go get one if you want.
No, that's okay.
Just right over there.
It was an easy way to finish a seam. The seam.
So if you don't know what pinking shears are, folks, just Google it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, so we have to have equipment. So you talked about making a pin cushion, a needle case, a scissors holder, and now we talk about a seam gauge and pinking shears. What else did we need to sew that Mom had on hand? Because at that time we didn't have our own equipment. It was her sewing equipment we used.
Well, we used the treadle machine. I don't know where you're going with this. What are you thinking of?
Well, is there something we had to have a pattern? Probably, although
guess what?
Yeah,
that was a pattern here.
the first skirt that you and I made in 4-H was a gathered skirt, and we didn't use a pattern. Mom would just say, "Well, you use twice the length of fabric that will go around your hip," and then you gathered that up at the waist, and you made a side seam and had a placket. And I think my first skirt it was snaps. I don't think it was a zipper, and put the waistband on and interfaced the waistband so it would have some supports and some depth and fold up to the waist, and that was it. And then we put in the hem. And Jack, show us patterns again, please.
Patterns. Okay, this is an early one, and I can tell it's early because see, it only cost 65 cents. And this is a very simple skirt.
Do you remember making any of those skirt patterns? That one? Any skirt styles?
I kind of think I made the A-line skirt.
Okay.
And then next was this was Simplicity also, and it cost $1. Pretty much the same, style. And I would say we use Simplicity patterns mostly. Sometimes we used McCall's, and sometimes we used Butterick. And Butterick fashions typically were a bit more involved than the Simplicity.
And then to get into Vogue, that would even be more involved yet. Probably more designer looking.
Right.
And so I don't recall using a Vogue pattern until I got into college.
Yeah. And looking at the back, we learned a lot of things on how to read patterns and how to read the back of the pattern envelope.
And notice that it's looking at those numbers there where it says view 1 skirt 35 or 36 inch without nap, or then it would go up to 54 inch. So those were the widths of fabrics back then. I don't know that you see many 35 or 36 inch fabrics anymore. And those are probably for cottons. And then the 54 inch probably would have been for woolen fabrics. There's also some down there for 44, 45, and I think those were more for cotton or dress weight fabrics, shirt fabrics, that type of thing.
Yeah. So we learned a lot there, and also learned a lot. We just learned a lot thanks to Mom. who was a pretty good seamstress.
I would love to know if those people watching this have any comments about their sewing and what they learned and what they liked about sewing, what they didn't like about sewing. And of course, one thing that we have to consider when you sew a garment, there's going to be an undergarment of some sorts on your body. And so what did we learn about undergarments, or what did we wear back in the 50s as undergarments?
Well, early on, we had to wear girdles and nylons.
Yes. Yes. And of course, bras, if we were of that age, that we had the need of that. But sometimes we might have worn a garter belt to hold up nylons, because pantyhose hadn't really come into being yet, being made. And we in the 50s, really the hosiery industry was working itself away from seamed nylons to unseamed nylons. So you just put them on, and you didn't have to be very careful as to how that seam, if there was a seam, how it was placed in the back of your leg, so it went up straight.
That's right.
Up your leg. And then there were full slips, half slips. Oh gee, every Christmas we would get a full slip. I hated that gift. I was not what I liked, because I didn't. There were so many other items that I would have rather had for Christmas than a full
slip. Yeah. I don't remember that.
Oh, do you remember petty pants?
Oh yes,
I think they didn't come into style though till in the 60s.
Yes.
Yes.
Folks, if you're looking on this, comment on the bottom to see. Tell us about that if you have experience.
Yes.
So
go ahead.
I was going to say, let's go on to, as we grew. Well, first of all, I want to draw some attention here to.
Okay, tell us what you have back there.
What I have here is a quilt that Mom made, and she used fabrics from our childhood. So many of these fabrics here are familiar to us. For instance, these are one of the first ones right here. This is a little teddy bear and a little kitty with flowers. And let me show you this fabric. This is a 1940s fabric.
I love that. It's so
little bunnies.
Lovely.
Yeah. And I found this in Mom's hope chest. There's a little fabric sample here. So
I don't know that I can't remember any garments made out of that. It's just that I do remember it being packed away in a drawer.
You know, and this is a 36-inch fabric.
Okay.
So it must have been a feed stack. I mean, it only goes like.
Well, remember then you could rip those, tear those if you had yard goods and you had a bolt of cotton fabric and needed to only a yard of it. What's her name? The person who was helping us at the store, at the fabric store.
Is that clerk?
Yeah. Thank you. She would measure out a yard of fabric, kind of snip in the with the scissors right at the fold line, and then she would rip it, and that would be the best way to get the exact amount of yardage, because then you knew it would be on the grain.
Yeah, but that would work only if it was a quality fabric and was on grain. Otherwise, it would go, instead of straight up and down, it would go like this.
Yes.
Then you'd know you didn't get it.
Yes. But you love the fabric, so you still bought it.
Yeah. So anyway, there are these first ones. And then as we got older and we needed to have more challenges, then we matched stripes and we matched plaids. So there is only one garment I kept in all my years of sewing here. It was this fabric. It's a beautiful fabric, and this was my challenge one because the stripes needed to be matched. And guess what, folks? I happen to have that.
There it is.
There it is, matched here.
How many times did you have to take out that seam to get those?
I don't know. But there it is. And then the back, of course, has a zipper. And of course, that needed to be matched as well. So this was really, and I did well with this within the State Dress Review because of
people might want to know where we were 4-H members.
Well, we were County. Bismarck, North Dakota.
And our club's name, the girls' club's name was the Minokan Busy Workers, and our boys' club was the Minokan Progressives. And of course, girls could not be in the boys' club. So if you wanted to show livestock, or you had to be in the girls' club first. So we were in both.
So this is the dress. The picture.
Okay, let me see if I can. I'm having trouble here. There we go. Let's see. Solo Layla. There we go. Yes. So you actually made 2 garments.
Yes, I did.
And then did you ever wear a blouse under the purple jumper part just by itself?
No, I didn't, because I just love the dress by itself. So that dress had it was regulated cotton. And you want to tell people what regulated cotton was.
Yes, regulated cotton meant that the United States had put regulation on it. I kind of looked it up on Zoom the other day, and I thought that was regulated cotton was a weird name, but evidently you could sell cotton to the mills, and perhaps it wasn't regulated, and I don't know if that meant it had flaws or if it was lower quality, but when it was regulated, you had the stamp of an inspector on it.
Another challenge was matching plaids, and that's this one. This was Abbey flannel. It was really wonderful to sew with. And this is the one where I put the zipper in 7 times.
And why did you do that?
Because it was probably a thread or 2 off of perfection.
And why did we try to make garments sewn so as perfect as we could?
Because those were the standards we were raised with, folks.
Yes.
My mom would say, as I said, do it. If you're going to do it right. Okay.
Yes. But she never laid that over our heads.
No, it's just like, matter of factly, if you're going to do it, so that you're personally satisfied with, oh, if you're satisfied with it, okay. Well, we that ran into our standards.
Yeah, the standard bar was there, and we needed to meet it. And I know sometimes for me in sewing was so frustrating, because especially if it was a hot summer day and I was sewing and we didn't have air conditioning, I was sewing on the machine with wool fabric, and or if it was a plaid wool fabric and I put that zipper in, and those threads wouldn't match, and I'd say to Mom, I'd take the garment to her. I knew what she would say before I took it, but I had to have this confirmation that I guess I needed to do better. But she looked at me and she looked at the fabric and the garment, how I had made that seam or put in that zipper, and she said, "Well, what do you think?" Well, I knew what I was supposed to do, and she didn't have to tell me to go do it. So anyway, I finally sort of mastered getting it made the best I could. But when you put something in and take out stitches so many times, you can really destroy the fabric. You can stretch the fabric depending on if it's on a straight seam or curve. So you have to be careful about that too. But anyway, it was the lesson that we learned, and the kind of, you might say, the unspoken requirements of a garment, or really anything we did in our home. Okay, did you have some favorite fabrics? I think you might have lighted on it, but
right, I did like that, and I enjoyed sewing in wool too. Progressed in our skills. We entered the Make It Yourself with Wool contests, and then I can remember making. It must have been when I was a senior, and one of my prizes was a length of light blue fabric, my favorite color. So I made an A-line wool skirt lined, and I wore that all through college and maybe even after that.
Well, lining a fabric, that's a whole nother story too. That was almost like a jump in the learning curve, because you're almost making 2 garments for the same one. And wasn't it a blessing? Probably in the 60s it was, when wool fabric came back with a slick backing on it. It was like it was adhered to each other, so you didn't have to line the garment. You had a lining already made, and it gave the wool fabric a little more substantive backing to it for a garment.
However, I can remember sewing on that, but I still wanted to have it lined. It just made it a better quality, I think.
Did it feel better on you too when you
Oh
wore the?
yes, yeah. Otherwise, it may have been more substantial, but I think the lining just that made it a better looking garment.
Okay. Well, I'm curious to know those seamstresses out there in the 50s when you were younger and required less fabric for making a garment than what you do now. Were any of you able to make a skirt out of a yard of wool fabric? And of course, that really cut the cost if you could get it on that. It was the skirt lengths were a little shorter as the decade got longer, and so consequently, anytime we could buy see a piece of wool fabric we liked and we could only needed a yard, boy, I remember spending some money from my savings account just to buy that. Or we'd often get fabric for Christmas gifts, and then over Christmas vacation we would sew. We started with that treadle machine, but then when you were in high school and I got to, I think it was, and maybe I was in 8th grade, then mom and dad bought us portable electric sewing machines.
It was my freshman year of college that I got that for Christmas.
Okay. And I tell you that the huge difference between sewing with a treadle machine where you could really control the speed of that needle going up and down, and then all of a sudden we had this electric machine that it just went zoom, and it was something to have to learn how to get used to in order to make our sewing the standards that we wanted with that, because we had to control so much faster than what we did before. So when you went to a fabric store, when you went to Penny's, when you went to A.W. Lucas Company in Bismarck, did for fabric, or maybe the Singer Sewing Company in Bismarck had this fabric, and then eventually I know we had the fabric shop, it was called, on Main Street in Bismarck, and they had many fashion fabrics. When you wanted to sew something, did you look for fabric first or the pattern?
I think it would have to do with the occasion.
Okay.
What was my goal? So,
you're a good 4-H'er. You've got goals.
Oh yeah. So I guess in a general statement, that would be what I would say. It just depends.
Sure. You also had mentioned that in 4-H there was such a handout put out called the 14 Points of Good Grooming.
14 points. Yep.
Yes, 14 points. And this all had to do with, I suppose, our participation in the fashion review and knowing how to present ourselves with good grooming. Can you remember any of those points, Jackie?
This is off the cuff, folks. I could maybe remember some of them. The jewelry, things that were considered would be jewelry, gloves, heels, purse, if the garment would be plain or if it had pleats or some sort of decoration sewn into it. And if you as a model wore glasses, that would add to it as well. Those types of things. And usually I don't think I even met the 14 points. That would be ostentatious and over the top. But anyway, that was the limit, 14 points.
So each one of those items was worth a point?
Right. Mm-hmm. Unless you had like glasses with rhinestones or something, that was 2 points.
I wonder who was the creator of this 14 points of grooming. And of course,
maybe it was some home economics person who wrote this for her master's degree. I don't know.
Sure. No,
I suppose we could Google it.
North Dakota Extension Service, perhaps. Yeah. Yes. And I think too about the jewelry that we wore in the 50s, even for little girls. And I think you've got an example there of something that was fun to wear. Let me give you the full screen. Oh boy, did you ruin it? What happened?
Oh no, I just popped it.
Yes, pop beads. You remember pop beads? They were so fun.
They were. They came in a variety of colors. These were Mom's. They're brown. She wore lots of brown. I had blue and Janine had green.
I remember I would make a bracelet.
Mm-hmm.
I'd take a certain length and put it around my wrist and make a bracelet.
Such a
And
variety.
yes, and that, of course, in the 1950s was an era before anyone ever thought of possibly having your colors done, so you knew what colors looked best on you.
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought Jackie was so fortunate because she could wear blue. And I always got stuck wearing green. And I guess I thought that was just the color I was supposed to wear. So I ended up a lot of times selecting dresses or fabrics that were the greens and the golds and the rusts, and they weren't my colors at all. So I could have certainly have done myself a much bigger favor had I been wearing reds and blues and
Right.
and
She can.
yeah, that type of thing.
Then there's something such as this. Anyone know what this is all about? A
Tell us
sweater guard.
Okay.
It had
And
a
so if you had a cardigan sweater, how
right.
did you use those? Let me get full screen again.
Okay.
Okay.
That-
How
the
did you
clamp was on the back,
Uh-huh.
and then they were just clamped to the sides of the sweater, and you wouldn't have to button the sweater; it would just kind of be hanging out, but being held onto your shoulders with these guards.
Mm-hmm. Now we don't cover poodle skirts, even though it was the 50s, because we never had one, although many young ladies who did, those skirts were made out of a circular piece of wide wool felt fabric. And then whatever ornamentation was sewn on them, of course, it
Like a
probably
poodle.
was a poodle. Yep. And the leash. Was there ever a purse on that as well?
I don't think so. It was the leash.
Yes. We were too young and
Yeah.
for a poodle skirt, and I don't think Mom would have really felt that we had a need for a poodle skirt at that time. But let me tell you now, when we do book presentations, a lot of times we do wear poodle skirts and bobby socks, and sometimes
saddle shoes.
Yes. So you have to book a presentation with us if you want to learn more about the book or life in the 50s, and we'll come dressed for it. What else? The earring necklace combinations. Remember those and the clip-on earrings? I think they were more for mature women than they were for our ages.
Right.
But Mom had some of those, and I know she'd always say, "Oh, those clip-ons just hurt her ears so much." And there was only, I can think of one lady in our neighborhood who had pierced ears. I think Zella. Zella had pierced ears. She would wear little hoop earrings all the time. Yes.
And now we both do.
Oh yeah, and I mean that's the thing. I'd hate to wear clip earrings anymore.
Pinch.
When we sewed with fabrics, we also had zippers, or we had buttons, or snaps. Do you remember the techniques that we used for sewing on a snap, or how we made that hand stitching pretty?
Well, let's see. Folks, we didn't practice this, so here I go.
Well, it was kind of a buttonhole stitch.
Yeah. Well, which one? Okay, for sewing on snaps, we had a single thread, and I should have had one here to demonstrate. Sometimes we would just loop it through the
little hole.
The little hole. Sometimes, though, I think more often than not, each stitch would be knotted. So we'd have these nice little neat rows of knots around the outside. We would also make bound buttonholes, like when I made this coat suit here. That had bound buttonholes, which was I guess we can't see it. There they are. Anyway, this is one of those creative things that I made a walking suit and coat ensemble. You see, I'm holding a piece of fabric. Well, if that fabric had been, I put a zipper in at the bottom of the jacket. And so you just zip that bottom part onto it, and all of a sudden you have a coat.
Well, and I think it was neat too, because you could have that as that coat. You could take off the bottom length, and then it would be a walking coat. Or walking suit rather. And then if you took off that layer of wool, that length of wool. Then you had just a regular suit jacket with that skirt. It was
Right.
so creative, and I was so impressed with it. And then the wool was just gorgeous.
Oh,
It's
it's beautiful. Yeah.
that pink and had that nubby thread to it, and then with the bound buttonholes was beautiful, beautiful presentation.
I think it was fun.
Yes.
Another thing I did when in high school, we put on the My Fair Lady, and so I used this fabric.
Oh, is it sheer?
It is sheer, yes, and so underneath it was this. It was gold.
Yes.
And I was Lady Boxington here, and I made the hat also, and unfortunately, I don't have the hat. And covered our grandma's black umbrella with the same fabric. And I believe I found the dress maybe in the Goodwill, and then I purchased some fabric to make some can't see them, some poofiness over it.
Some chiffon, maybe.
Yeah, chiffon, yeah, something like that.
Yes.
So like this, this was. That was the main fabric, and then I purchased that to be.
So, what's the purpose? Why? What you're showing us? Why do you have those little pieces of fabric on the face?
I'm so glad you asked because many. I'll get it over here. When you were in 4-H a long, long time, you submitted your club members' record book, and this took me places because I had kept such good records. Winning contests because of the record that I kept, and so you see the pinking shears around here. Pinking shear. Okay, so everything that I sewed, I have this whole book that shows everything I've ever made in 4-H. I mean, it was hundreds of items. So
would you say
I'm not showing you the entire book? Would
you say that clothing was your favorite project?
It was that and horsemanship. That's the other side of it. But yes, clothing was, and I love that was the first hat I ever made was for the Ascot scene in the My Fair Lady, and then about 10 years ago here locally at our local theater, the My Fair Lady was produced. And I got to make all the hats for the Ascot scene, the black and white ones. It was just so fun to be creative. I matched the style with the dress that the actress is wearing and their personality. And so at my start in 4-H, 4-H gave me wings for many things, not only besides sewing, but for many things in life.
Yes, and the 4-H really was the inspiration for us to both go to NDSU and major in home economics education, and it was just a great forecast for what our lives would become because of our 4-H participation. So I hope viewers that you had the experience to be part of 4-H club. Maybe it wasn't in North Dakota, maybe it was, but the experience of being in a 4-H program is wonderful. It's great training and inspires creativity and develops skills. It's a great way to live the life of a child, and we lived on a farm, and at that time in the 50s 4-H was more for country kids, but now it's open to anybody. And what a way to develop a personality is through the opportunities in 4-H. So Jackie, as we're getting ready to close our program today, what's one favorite thing from 4-H? I don't care if it's horsemanship, sewing, clothing, or camps, whatever. What's the favorite thing that stands out to you for your?
I am really grateful for learning the skills that I learned in 4-H, and not only for sewing, but for so many other things. And even today, I maybe need to do something, and I hear Mom's words, which were, "Think, Jackie, think." So I'm sure she told me that many times when we were working on 4-H projects, but that has carried through. So besides this, I was always kind of a social butterfly, and so I really, really enjoyed going to camps with other 4-Hers from within the county, and then also as we got older, we could go to leadership camps for kids, 4-H members with other counties,
Yes.
and many of the friendships I made in 4-H, those people went to NDSU also, and so that continued on. So I have lifelong friends, thanks to 4-H.
Yep. I would say for me, 4-H for me was the best, one of the best things that helped develop my character was the 4-H demonstration program. I was a very, very shy little girl. I would rather hide behind mom's circle skirts than talk to anybody. But when I gave that first 4-H demonstration at 10 years old, it was making muffins. That just seemed to open the opportunities for me to bloom. And I accepted those opportunities and those challenges and move forward from there in a variety of projects. But the 4-H demonstration program particularly really was part of and the springboard for my professional career and for who we are, for us being able to do these fun chats. And if you want to know more about us, where should people go, Jackie, to learn more about the Pfeiffer Sisters?
Well, see that purple banner below? It's white with the white lettering. Go to www.whilethewindmillwatch.com for information on us and the book and our vendors and these 1950s fun chats. And you'll find a variety of topics that are educational and talk about the recent history of the 1950 decade. So until next time,
yes,
tell your friends and even your relatives about the 1950s fun chat.
Yes, thank you for watching. We hope we inspired you and brought back memories from your life in the 1950s and perhaps as a 4-H'er. Bye-bye.
Toodaloo.